February 8, 1587, Fotheringhay Castle, England. A hushed crowd watches as a woman in her mid-40s steps onto a black-draped scaffold. Despite 19 years of imprisonment, she carries herself with unmistakable royal dignity. Her servants weep as she kneels at the execution block. This is Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, once ruler of Scotland, former Queen Consort of France, and legitimate heir to England's throne in the eyes of many. She extends her arms, lays her head upon the block, and whispers her final prayer. "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." The executioner raises his axe high above her neck. It falls, but something goes wrong. The blade strikes not her neck, but the back of her head. Mary screams in agony, a queen's cry echoing through the hall. Blood pours from the wound, but she remains conscious, still alive. Panicking, the executioner strikes again, and misses again. Only on the third attempt does the axe finally sever her neck. Not cleanly, but with a butcher's imprecision that leaves her head hanging by a thread of sinew before a final hack detaches it. As the executioner lifts her head to the crowd, declaring, "God save Queen Elizabeth," the ghastly spectacle takes an even more macabre turn. The head falls from his grasp, revealing that Mary had worn a wig. Her real hair, cut short and grey from years of captivity, is exposed to the stunned onlookers. Then, witnesses report something that would haunt Tudor England. Mary's lips continue moving for nearly 15 minutes after decapitation, as though still in prayer. This is the true story of how one of Europe's most controversial monarchs was publicly executed after decades of political betrayal. An execution so shocking that Queen Elizabeth I would spend years trying to deny responsibility for it, even if she secretly ordered it to happen. Mary Stuart's tumultuous life began with royalty and ended with tragedy, spanning a mere 44 years that encompassed more drama, intrigue, and heartbreak than most could imagine in several lifetimes. Born on December 8, 1542, Mary became Queen of Scotland when she was just 6 days old after the death of her father, King James V, a newborn infant already carrying the weight of a nation's crown. This set the stage for the political manipulation that defined her entire existence. Her early childhood unfolded against the backdrop of the rough wooing, a brutal military campaign by England's Henry VIII, who sought to force the infant queen into marriage with his young son Edward. To protect her, Scotland sent 5-year-old Mary to France, where she grew up in the sophisticated French court, educated alongside the royal children. At 15, she married the French Dauphin Francis, becoming Queen Consort of France when he ascended to the throne a year later. But this fairy tale beginning quickly unraveled. Francis died from an ear infection after just 17 months on the throne, leaving Mary a widow at 18. With her position in France weakened, she returned to Scotland in 1561 to reclaim her Scottish throne. But the Scotland she returned to had changed dramatically. The Protestant Reformation had swept through the country, yet Mary remained devoutly Catholic. This immediately created tension with influential nobles and with the fiery Protestant preacher John Knox, who condemned female Catholic monarchs as monstrous regiments of women. Mary's personal life became a sequence of disastrous decisions. Her second marriage to her first cousin Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, proved catastrophic. Handsome but dissolute, Darnley became increasingly jealous and power-hungry. In 1566, he participated in the murder of Mary's private secretary David Rizzio, who was stabbed 56 times in the pregnant Queen's presence. Less than a year later, Darnley himself was murdered when his residence was blown up with gunpowder. Though his body was found in the garden, having apparently escaped the explosion only to be strangled, the mystery of who orchestrated his death has never been conclusively solved. When Mary married the Earl of Bothwell, widely suspected of Darnley's murder, just 3 months after her husband's death, Scotland erupted in outrage. Nobles rebelled, forcing Mary to abdicate in favour of her 1-year-old son James. Imprisoned on a small island in Loch Leven, she escaped after nearly a year and raised an army, but was defeated in 1568 at the Battle of Langside. Fleeing south, Mary made a fateful decision that would lead to her eventual execution. She crossed into England, seeking protection from her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. Elizabeth faced an impossible dilemma. Mary was not only a Catholic claimant to England's throne, but she was also a fellow anointed monarch. Yet keeping Mary free in England risked her becoming a rallying point for Catholic rebellions. Elizabeth's solution was pragmatic: house arrest. For the next 19 years, Mary was moved between various castles and manors, never free but never charged with any crime. She was allowed her own servants, could write and receive letters, though they were often intercepted. and lived in relative comfort. But comfortable captivity is still captivity, and as year followed year with no prospect of release, Mary grew increasingly desperate, a desperation that would eventually lead her to entertain plots that sealed her fate. If you're finding this deep dive into royal intrigue fascinating, please take a moment to subscribe as we regularly uncover history's most shocking executions, royal scandals, and pivotal moments that change the course of nations. Thank you to all who do. By 1586, Mary had been Elizabeth's prisoner for 18 years. Now 44, her health was deteriorating and her hopes for release had been repeatedly dashed. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's spy master, Sir Francis Walsingham, had been meticulously monitoring Mary's correspondence, waiting for evidence to eliminate the Scottish Queen permanently. That summer, his patience was rewarded with the discovery of the Babington Plot, a Catholic conspiracy to assassinate Elizabeth, free Mary, and place her on England's throne with Spanish military support. The plot was masterminded by Anthony Babington, a young Catholic nobleman who had once served as a page in the Earl of Shrewsbury's household when Mary was held there. Through an elaborate system of smuggled letters, hidden in beer barrels and sealed packets of silk, Babington communicated the assassination plan to Mary. Unknown to both Babington and Mary, Walsingham had infiltrated this letter network through a double agent, Gilbert Gifford. More crucially, Walsingham's master codebreaker, Thomas Philippes, could decipher Mary's elaborate encryption. On July 17, 1586, Babington wrote to Mary outlining the plot in explicit detail, including the planned dispatch of the usurper, Elizabeth's assassination, and Mary's rescue. Mary's response on July 25th would become the evidence that condemned her. In it, she expressed approval for the enterprise and offered advice on securing foreign ports for Spanish landing. Walsingham had his evidence but wanted more. Philippes forged a postscript to Mary's letter, asking Babington to name the 6 gentlemen who would carry out Elizabeth's assassination. Babington provided the names, sealing the fate of the conspirators and Mary herself. In August 1586, Babington and 13 co-conspirators were arrested. They suffered the gruesome punishment for treason, hanging, drawing, and quartering. Witnesses reported that Elizabeth, disturbed by the excessive cruelty shown to the first group executed, ordered the remaining conspirators be hanged until dead before the rest of the sentence was carried out. With the conspirators eliminated, attention turned to Mary. Her trial presented unprecedented legal questions. She was an anointed sovereign, not an English subject. Could she be tried for treason against a country she didn't rule? And could one queen judge another? A special court of 36 noblemen and royal officials was convened at Fotheringhay Castle in Northamptonshire, where Mary had been moved. Mary initially refused to recognize the court's authority. "I am a queen by right of birth, and my words should be those of a queen and not of an inferior." She argued that as a foreign sovereign she was not subject to English law and demanded legal counsel, a request that was denied. Eventually, Mary agreed to appear, not to defend herself as a subject accused of crimes, but to clear her name. Without lawyers, documents, or witnesses to support her, Mary faced the court alone over 2 days in October 1586. The prosecution presented the intercepted letters as evidence of Mary's complicity. In a brilliant display of self-defense, Mary denied writing the most incriminating passages and demanded to see the originals, which had already been destroyed. She argued that she couldn't be held responsible for what others planned in her name, and reminded the court that as a prisoner denied free communication, her letters couldn't constitute genuine conspiracy. "Look to your consciences," she told the judges, "and remember that the theatre of the world is wider than the realm of England." Her eloquence made an impression, but the outcome was predetermined. On October 25, 1586, the court unanimously found Mary guilty of plotting to assassinate Elizabeth. The sentence was death. Parliament petitioned Elizabeth to carry out the sentence immediately, but the English Queen hesitated. Despite their rivalry, Elizabeth recognized that royal blood was sacred. If one queen could be executed, what might happen to others? For 3 months, Elizabeth delayed signing Mary's death warrant, searching for alternatives. Some historians suggest she hoped Mary might die naturally, solving the dilemma. Others believe she wanted Mary assassinated secretly, avoiding the public spectacle of royal execution. Finally, on February 1, 1587, Elizabeth signed the death warrant but gave ambiguous instructions about its delivery, later claiming she never intended immediate execution. Her secretary, William Davison, sensing her reluctance, took the initiative. The trap that began with Mary's flight to England 19 years earlier was finally closing. On the afternoon of February 7, 1587, Sir Thomas Andrews, the Sheriff of Northamptonshire, arrived at Fotheringhay Castle with commissioners bearing the death warrant. They found Mary in her chambers, unaware that her fate had been sealed. When informed she would be executed the following morning, Mary received the news with remarkable composure. "I could never have wished for a happier end," she allegedly responded, "than to shed my blood for the sake of my faith." While many condemned prisoners collapsed in terror or spent their final hours begging for mercy, Mary used her remaining time methodically. First, she requested time to put her affairs in order and write her will. She carefully divided her modest possessions among her servants, writing specific instructions for each item. To King Henri III of France, her former brother-in-law, she wrote a moving final letter. "Tonight, after dinner, I have been advised of my sentence. I am to be executed like a criminal at 8 in the morning. I have not had time to give you a full account of everything that has happened, but if you will listen to my doctor and my other unfortunate servants, you will learn the truth, and how, thanks be to God, I scorn death and vow that I meet it innocent of any crime." She then asked for her chaplain but was refused, a final religious slight from Protestant England to the Catholic Queen. Instead, she spent hours in prayer with her small prayer book, its pages wet with her tears. Throughout the night, Mary's 6 remaining servants helped her prepare for what she saw, not just as an execution, but as a public performance, her final chance to shape how history would remember her. She ate a light dinner and drank a little wine, determined to maintain her strength. Most symbolic was her choice of clothing for the execution. Under strict instruction from Elizabeth, Mary was to be denied any opportunity to present herself as a Catholic martyr. She wore a black satin dress as instructed, but beneath it concealed a bodice and petticoat of deep crimson, the color of Catholic martyrdom. This would only become visible at the moment of her death, a final defiance of Elizabeth's authority. Mary slept little that night. She spent the hours before dawn reading from the lives of the saints, drawing courage from accounts of Christian martyrs. She reportedly told Jane Kennedy, one of her ladies, "This soul will tonight be in heaven." Around dawn, Mary asked her women to bring out the handkerchiefs she had personally embroidered with her royal emblem. These would be tied around their eyes during the execution, so they would be spared witnessing the actual moment of death. To her physician, she gave a final instruction. He was to deliver her heart to her French relatives for burial in France, the country where she had spent her happiest years. At 8 o'clock, a knock came at her door. The sheriff had arrived to escort her to the Great Hall, where the scaffold awaited. Mary emerged from her chambers ready to face her final hour, not as a condemned criminal, but as an anointed queen meeting her destiny. February 8, 1587, dawned cold and grey over Fotheringhay Castle. In the Great Hall, roughly 300 witnesses had gathered to observe the execution of a queen, an almost unprecedented event in European history. A scaffold draped in black stood 2 feet high, with a low railing surrounding it. At its center waited the execution block, also covered in black cloth, and beside it, the executioner and his assistant, both masked. At approximately 8 o'clock, the hall doors opened. Mary Stuart entered, accompanied by 6 of her servants, 2 gentlemen ushers and 4 ladies. At 44, she was still strikingly beautiful. She walked steadily without assistance, showing no fear as she approached the scaffold. According to multiple witnesses, including Robert Wingfield, who left a detailed account, Mary ascended the scaffold with as much courage and dignity as she had ever evinced in her palace hall. She was described as majestical and cheerful in countenance, shocking many who expected to see a broken woman. Once on the scaffold, Mary addressed those assembled. She spoke softly, in accented English, forgiving her enemies and proclaiming her innocence of plotting against Elizabeth. She affirmed her Catholic faith, declaring, "I have lived in that faith, and I wish to die in that faith, since it is for the maintenance of that faith that I am called upon to shed my blood." The Dean of Peterborough, a Protestant clergyman, stepped forward to offer prayers according to the Anglican rite. Mary interrupted him. "Mr. Dean, I am settled in the ancient Catholic faith, and mind to spend my blood in defense of it." When he continued regardless, she turned away and began reciting Latin Catholic prayers, raising her voice to drown him out. After prayers, Mary prepared herself for death. She removed her black outer gown, revealing the crimson dress beneath. Gasps rippled through the crowd at this symbol of Catholic martyrdom. She then removed her veil, pearls, and crucifix, handing them to her ladies. One of the executioners knelt before her, asking forgiveness as was customary. Her ladies helped her to the block, sobbing as they tied handkerchiefs around her eyes. Mary knelt and placed her head on the block, extending her arms and repeating, "In manus tuas, Domine, commendo spiritum meum." Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. What happened next transformed a solemn execution into a grotesque spectacle that would haunt witnesses for the rest of their lives. The executioner, possibly nervous at beheading a queen or simply inexperienced, missed his mark. Rather than striking her neck cleanly, the first blow of the axe hit the back of Mary's head. Witnesses reported that she did not cry out, but her lips moved as if in prayer. The second blow also failed to sever her head completely. Only on the third strike did the executioner complete his grim task, finally separating her head from her body. As was customary, the executioner lifted the severed head by the hair, declaring, "God save Queen Elizabeth!" But in a macabre twist, the head fell from his grasp. Even more disturbing to witnesses was what happened next. Mary's lips reportedly continued to move for nearly 15 minutes after decapitation, while her body exhibited muscular contractions. Modern medical science explains this as post-mortem nerve responses, but to 16th century observers, it appeared as though Mary was still trying to pray even in death. As attendants moved to clear the scaffold, they discovered Mary's small terrier had hidden in her petticoats throughout the proceedings. The dog, covered in her blood, refused to leave her body and had to be forcibly removed. After the execution, everything that had touched Mary's blood was immediately burned to prevent relic hunters from claiming items associated with the Catholic Queen. Her clothes, the block, and even the scaffold itself were destroyed. Her body was embalmed and enclosed in a lead coffin, but remained unburied at Fotheringhay for nearly 6 months, while Elizabeth decided on an appropriate burial place. The botched, bloody nature of Mary's execution shocked even hardened Tudor courtiers accustomed to public executions. The triple stroke of the axe was seen by many Catholics as symbolic of the Trinity, further enhancing Mary's status as a martyr. For others, the brutality simply underscored the horror of one queen ordering the death of another. When news of Mary's execution, and particularly its botched nature, reached London, Elizabeth reacted with what appeared to be genuine shock and grief. She claimed the execution warrant had been dispatched against her wishes and immediately placed her secretary William Davison in the Tower of London, fining him 10,000 marks, approximately $2 million in today's currency. Many historians believe Elizabeth's response was calculated political theatre. This blame the secretary strategy allowed Elizabeth to reap the benefits of eliminating her Catholic rival, while publicly expressing horror at how it happened. King James VI of Scotland, Mary's son, who had not seen his mother since infancy, made diplomatic protests, but did not break his alliance with England. He insisted on an honourable burial for Mary. Initially interred at a Peterborough cathedral in a Protestant ceremony, Mary's remains were eventually reburied with full honours at Westminster Abbey, after James succeeded Elizabeth as King of England in 1603. In a striking historical irony, Mary finally achieved in death what she had sought in life: entry into England's most sacred royal space. The execution transformed Mary from political prisoner to Catholic martyr almost overnight. Across Catholic Europe, paintings, engravings, and medallions depicting her execution circulated widely. In these images, Mary was portrayed with the attributes of a saint, kneeling serenely before the block while angels waited to receive her soul. Pope Sixtus V, who had previously been reluctant to support plots to free Mary, now spoke openly of her martyrdom. Philip II of Spain, already planning an invasion of England, used Mary's execution as further justification for the Spanish Armada launched the following year. For English Catholics, already facing persecution under Elizabeth's religious settlement, Mary's execution represented a powerful symbol of their own suffering. Protestant propagandists countered with their own narratives. Beyond these religious dimensions, Mary's execution carried profound constitutional significance. For the first time, a sovereign monarch had been tried and executed through quasi-legal proceedings. Though Elizabeth tried to obscure her responsibility, the precedent was established. Monarchs could be held accountable for their actions. This precedent would echo through English history. Just 62 years later, during the English Civil War, King Charles I would be tried and beheaded by his own subjects. The judges at his trial explicitly referenced Mary's case as precedent for trying a monarch. Perhaps most significantly, Mary's execution marked a turning point in the relationship between Elizabeth and her subjects. After nearly 3 decades of carefully cultivated political imagery, the Virgin Queen, eternally youthful and merciful, the brutal reality of political power was laid bare. Elizabeth might project an image of reluctance, but when necessary, she would eliminate threats to her throne with cold efficiency. In art and literature, Mary's execution quickly became a potent symbol of female rivalry and political ruthlessness. The two queens, Elizabeth the Protestant Virgin and Mary the Catholic Mother, were portrayed as opposing archetypes of womanhood and rulership. This oversimplified narrative has persisted through centuries of plays, novels, and films, though historians now recognize both women as complex political actors navigating the male-dominated power structures of their time. With Mary's death, the Tudor era's religious conflicts entered their final phase. The Spanish Armada's defeat in 1588 secured Protestant England's independence, while Mary's son James eventually united the crowns of Scotland and England in 1603, fulfilling his mother's dynastic ambitions even as he maintained Elizabeth's Protestant settlement. Mary's execution thus stands as a pivotal moment when medieval notions of divine monarchy began giving way to more modern concepts of national sovereignty and constitutional accountability. The 3 strokes of the executioner's axe not only ended Mary's life, but also struck at the heart of the idea that monarchs were untouchable. 5 centuries later, Mary Stuart remains an enigmatic figure whose tragic end continues to fascinate. In those final moments on the scaffold at Fotheringhay, as the axe fell again and again, a queen became a legend, not just through how she lived, but through how brutally she died. Do you think her execution was justice or a royal cover-up? Let me know in the comments below. And please, don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories of nefarious leaders and events throughout history.